Evolve Now, Bob's story. This is my story. I am Bob Smith, and I'm going to relay the story of my life, really with the intention of bringing forward my inner voice as an evolving consciousness that evolved each and every story, evolved out of each and every story. My feeling now is the planet is up against it, and so evolution is a requirement right now for the human species to survive. There are so many problems the world over. I'm not going to go into this, but this is why I came up with the working title, Evolve Now. It's been the theme of my life. I have forever needed to evolve. And it's the theme of the present moment of the humankind on the planet. There's a need for the human consciousness to evolve, and to evolve the whole of life on the planet with it. The story of my life will be presented in 12-year segments. The first 12 years of my life were blessed. I was loved dearly and deeply by my mother and father. I was born in Seattle on August the 25th, 1948. My mother was 21 years old at the time, Helen. My father was 28 years old at the time, Don. And soon to follow were my two sisters, Gail and Diane. Gail born 2 years after I was, and Diane 3 years after I was. The first 12 years of my life were blessed because my mother and father were totally there for me and for my sisters. And so we had a wonderful family. Not that there weren't problems and issues. There were many problems and many issues. But the love that they poured upon us overshadowed any mistakes that they made. And so they are my first role models. And I'm so fortunate to have had them as my role models. My working philosophical belief is that we must seek the ideal at all times in our life, and that ideal is different qualities that we see in people we admire. So we must continue to seek the ideal to evolve into our higher potential, and we can manifest these ideals through seeing them in others and then creating them inside of us, or just following the inner quality that's already there. And so it is up to us to evolve into that which we're destined to be. We are a soul who is coming through a body and a computer-like mind. And so I was programmed in the 50s to be like a 50s person. So the first 12 years of my life were filled full of normal childhood catastrophes and triumphs. At age 3, my parents moved to Lake City in Seattle, the Lake City area of Seattle, and I spent from age 3 till 12 at that location. It was a modest house. There were 3 bedrooms when we first got at the home. As my father came back from the war and had spent 5 years in World War II overseas in Europe, and came back and met my mother at Central Washington College, now called Central Washington University, in Ellensburg. And they came back to Seattle, and my father was a salesman for my grandfather's business, Air Smith and Company. That was a wholesale feed and grain business that sold grain and wholesale feeds to big-time farmers who had big chicken farms or big beef farms. So my father became a part of that feed trading company, and my mother was a housewife and just stayed with the kids because there were three of us and we came in rapid succession. My childhood was filled full of athletics. My father loved sports, and I quickly grew to love sports. And so those were my dreams as I was a kid growing up, were sports dreams of becoming some kind of fantastic athlete, or just dreaming myself to be a fantastic athlete. And my skinny little body didn't seem to have that indelibly put on my body, because I was a very delicate young man. And yet, with the training that my father had and the desire that he had to bring forward athletics into his life and the life of the Smith family, I became well trained and became a superb athlete at a young age. Next, I'd like to go into an inside story of the first 12 years. It so happens that my two sisters, Gail and Diane, were discovered by the famous Olympian swimming champion Helene Madison at a very young age, when they were 4 and 5 years old, and Helene saw a promise in my two sisters as swimmers and presented an act to be put forward in the Aquafollies, Seattle's finest summertime show, Seattle's biggest summertime show. And so my sisters, at age 6 and 7, made it into the Aquafollies as the first Seattle participants in Seattle's biggest show.
In 1950, Seattle hosted its first ever Seafair, an annual festival that's been hosted every year since to celebrate the city's ubiquitous waterways. A major part of that first Seafair was something called the Aquafollies, which occurred here on Green Lake's South Shore.
The Aquafollies combined water ballet, comedy, live music, dancing, and dramatic high diving performances off of platforms that flanked the stage that were as high as 40 feet, about the size of a 4-story building. The show reached its height in the late 1950s, requiring additional seating to be added to the 5,000-seat theater.
My two sisters, Gail and Diane, became the stars of the 1958 Aquafollies. And it was a big deal in our family, so every night I would go and watch them with my father, and my mother attended to them, as well as Helene, the coach. And it was kind of like magic. At the Aqua Theater on Green Lake, my sisters performed for about 2.5 weeks, with the MC being Bob Hope that particular 2.5 week stretch. It was just full of glitter and glamour and magic, and there were my sisters just being their 6 and 7-year-old selves when they'd come back or talk about it. It was a huge upliftment in terms of just feeling that new possibilities could just come up out of the blue. And so it opened me up to, as I say, a kind of a magic.